there's a crap ton of students who are not proficient in science in grade 12. And so one
Can
of the
I say
reasons we
something
make
about
fun of
just
these
this
things.
screen? I want to say something about this
Yeah.
screen because all too often when I've showed these results, I will hear from
Mhm.
people about, well, not everybody's good at science, or not everybody's going to go into a STEM career, or so what if only 20%? So it's ironic. The same people who are saying DEI is great, we need more representation, and it isn't right that it's always ends up being, white or Asian people or whatever. When you show them that 80% of American kids, not disaggregated by race, mind you, are not proficient in science at the end of 12th grade, they come up with 17 reasons why that's okay. So now what we're doing is trying to make sure that the 20% are equally represented of all the different kinds of people and all the kinds of experiences. Let me tell you, parents and everybody listening, why this is a problem. What do we mean by science and proficient at science when you're talking about K-12? We're talking about the basic understanding of the building blocks of life. Okay. So you really, when you come out of high school, you should have a basic understanding of why the wheel matters, how gravity operates, why reality is reality scientifically, so that you can't be fooled into thinking, yeah, sex, it's all up to you, chromosome schmomosomes. I mean, those kind of basic understandings about the reality of existence and a understanding of where humans are as physiological, biological, creatures, and the actions we take on our environment. So, how are we going to actually fix climate change if we don't understand how we operate in time and space? So, understanding science at this basic level, even things like photosynthesis, are pretty key to not being fooled or lied to, or even to just have a basic survival ability in the wild. God forbid there's an EMP and you got to survive. You need to understand, how do you start a freaking fire? What are the chemical components of water? Things like that kind of matter. So when they say you're not proficient at science, they're not saying you're not Einstein. They're saying you're basically at the mercy. You're 80% of America's children are now at the mercy of the 20%, whoever they may be, when it comes to survival on planet Earth. Whatever you want to tell them about how things work, you could go back to pre-Galilean, you could go back to the terracentric, whatever, dispense with heliocentrism and all that. Nope. Yep. Everything revolves around the Earth now. Oh, did you know the Earth is flat? Oh, by the way, there's no such thing as men and women, and this can be whatever you want. That's what this means. So I hope I've helped contextualize this data a little bit
Oh,
for the average normie. That's what it means.
exactly. And I mean, that's that's the point that I want to make. And in that, if we're not training kids to have any proficiency in science, I mean, how can you possibly even train the next generation of scientists, those people who actually go on and want to do a science career, want to get into meteorology or hydrology or climate or physics or chemistry or any number of the different, you know, physical sciences and STEM or even the social sciences, which they've got their own problem right now with the ideological bias in social sciences, but that's a whole other problem to get into for another day. So yeah, there is that. And so I do also want to add this. I think Deb and I would both agree that we're not necessarily talking about all physics teachers. We don't think all physics teachers are awful. There are good
No.
physics teachers out there for sure. Um, but we are talking about the ones who we are talking about the research and the educators who have been causing lots of problems. So, oh goodness, let me see. I'm gonna switch
And a word
scenes.
about that really quickly, because
Go.
people sometimes go, what's the difference between an educator and a teacher? And like, why aren't you playing games with semantics? No, I'm not anyway. I'm sure that Adrian isn't. Can't speak for other people, but I did a couple of shows this week, which I would recommend to people. You're going to have to knuckle down and have some stamina. They're kind of long, but if you genuinely want to understand where these things come from, you watch the shows I did with Christine Jones about mental healthism and the mind, the mind field in education. You'll understand that education itself as a field of study, as a separate field apart from, let's say, I study physics and I decide I want to teach physics. I study math and I decide I want to teach math. The study of education itself, the whole idea that we should be doing papers like this, that we should study how to teach things as its own discipline, is only about 100 little over 100 years old, 120 some odd years old. And it was begun by behaviorists. And this is very, very important. This was not begun by scholars. This was not begun because a group of people in their discipline said, I want to make sure that all the students in America, who I'm trying to teach physics to, come away understanding physics. What's going to be the best possible way for me to do that? Before that, for thousands of years, we actually kind of saw through evidence what worked, how transmitting this information to the next generation would work and not work. And there were many different ways of doing it. And people would be able to individualize those because we didn't have a mass school system that we had to scale to thousands of people. So the idea that now we needed to not only corral people into a single room and scale the teaching and then modify a one size fits all kind of way to make physics stick in their brains or whatever, that's very young. And so papers like this, when you talk about educators versus teachers or instructors or tutors, or even they used to be called masters, people who are masters of their craft, that went by the wayside. And now every teacher is seen as a sort of researcher. Even at the lowly level, you're either carrying out someone's research that because it's been taught to you as a teacher, as an educator, as pedagogy, or even just straight up as theory. And then they tell you right away, like, here's the theory, go do the praxis. You're experimenting on children, in other words. And I want to make that clear. It's not just semantics. They see themselves as participating in an ongoing experiment in which they are researchers and your children are subjects. They're constantly trying to hone their research to better achieve their goals, which we can get into at some point. What are their goals, Deb? But we'll talk about that later.
Well, and
they're not yours. To sum it up, they're not yours, mom and dad. There.
Well, and to your point, also, it's an experiment that that is so unofficial, because if it were an actual social science experiment, you'd have to run it through institutional review boards and all this other kind of stuff that actually has safeguard norms to protect children and things like that built in. But that does not happen because this is happening on the fly. Did you like that video? Are you curious about the rest of the video? Because that clip came from an episode of SciChat Saturday, and the full episode is linked in the description. As always, stay curious.